While we are often told that the world is a sprawling game of chess where we must manipulate every piece to survive, it is possible that the most effective move on the board is to stop looking at the board entirely. I recently started reading The 48 Laws of Power, and I can imagine a possible world where its opening claim feels true, telling you the world is a giant courtroom, that everyone around you is scheming, manipulating, playing chess while you play checkers, and the only way to survive is to become a better player than everyone else. In this view, every interaction is a calculated maneuver. Every smile is a shield. Every favor is a debt waiting to be collected. It posits that if you try to be good in a world of wolves, you will simply become dinner. Playing the game of power is less like a choice and more like basic survival. But let's pause the argument and ask a slower question. What might power actually be? If we think about it through the lens of physics, power is influence over reality. The ability to move atoms that weren't moving, to change what would have happened into what actually happens. Imagine you're locked in a room on the moon. You have food, water, oxygen, everything you need to survive, but you cannot move a single atom outside your cell. You cannot influence anything beyond those walls. In that room, it wouldn't matter how many laws of power you had memorized, because there would be no superior to outshine and no enemy to crush. You would be a god of nothing. This is what minimal power looks like. An isolated system with zero effect on the external world. Consider the difference between a fish and a beaver. A fish exists within the river. It adapts to the current. It moves through the world, but the world remains largely indifferent to its presence. A beaver, however, decides that the river should be a lake. It fells trees and constructs a barrier that rewires the local geography. The beaver has more power because it has a greater capacity to translate its internal will into external physical change. A beaver might stop a river, but a human can burn a forest, flatten a mountain, increase the temperature of the entire planet, build a rocket and fly to the moon. To the rest of the animal kingdom, we are something like gods in our influence over reality. We reshape continents, we split atoms, we edit the code of life itself, and to one another we are mighty forces that must be accounted for. Our interactions with one another are high stakes because we are the most potent tools available. If you can convince 1,000 people to move a rock, that rock moves faster than if you pushed it alone. Outshine your superior at your own peril. Your dealings with another person, even for just a few minutes, could mean the difference between thriving and struggling, between opportunity and closed doors, between your genes carrying forward or stopping with you. This is what the 48 Laws of Power gets right. Other people are enormously consequential. Your relationship with them matters. This is why humans obsess over dealing with other people when we think about power. In Game of Thrones, Tyrion Lannister finds himself imprisoned in a place called the Eyrie. He's a brilliant political mind. He knows how to navigate courts, manipulate nobles, outmaneuver rivals. He's read every book on power there is, and none of it matters. Because the only person standing between him and freedom is a dimwit jailer named Maud. A man who can barely string a sentence together. The entire Game of Thrones, all the scheming in King's Landing, all the alliances and betrayals, they might as well be happening on another planet. The only power struggle left is between a man in a cell and the person holding the keys. So Tyrion adapts. He shouts, he bargains, he bribes, he learns the psychology of the one gatekeeper who stands between him and daylight. And I think this is the perfect metaphor for something most of us get backwards about power. Alexander the Great once said something that should make us pause. As he set out to conquer the known world, he looked at what stood between him and his goal. He didn't say there are all these kings, all these armies, all these fortified cities. He said something else entirely. I have met the enemy, it is I. He understood that the first barrier, and possibly the greatest barrier, wasn't external, it was internal. There's a struggle happening inside all of us that we don't talk about enough. A war between the conscious and subconscious, between ambition and the self-saboteur, between discipline and temptation, between the version of you that sets the alarm for 5 a.m. and the version of you that hits snooze. And I would argue that most people attribute wildly disproportionate influence to the games they play with courts and colleagues and competitors compared to the game they play with their own inner jailer. Many people dramatically overestimate the influence of the court outside while underestimating the authority of the guard inside. Let me give you another way to think about this. Now consider a machine. A forklift can lift far more weight than a human arm. By almost any mechanical definition, it is more powerful. But imagine this scenario. You need to move a box across the room. I offer you two choices. You can use your hands, or I can tie your hands behind your back and you can try to operate a forklift with your nose. Which approach gives you more influence over reality? Which one actually moves the box? Other people might resemble forklifts, immense potential force, dangerous, useful, transformative. The control of the self is the hand that operates the forklift of social influence. When we lack self-discipline, when we lack clarity of purpose, or when we are governed by our subconscious whims, our hand is broken. We then try to compensate by being more manipulative, more cunning, and more political with the forklifts around us. We try to make up for a lack of internal strength with an excess of external scheming. But what if the most magnetic form of power is actually the byproduct of total self-mastery? In Forrest Gump, there's a scene where Forrest just starts running. No announcement, no recruitment campaign, no manipulation or influence tactics, just a man and his own legs and a decision. He runs to the end of his driveway, then to the end of town, then across the state, then across the country. And somewhere along the way, people start joining him. First one, then a dozen, then hundreds. A movement emerges from nothing but a man in control of his own motion. Would the same thing have happened if Forrest had put out flyers? Who wants to go on a cross-country run? No set purpose, no finish line. Who's interested? Not a chance. Sometimes it is precisely those who control themselves best who, through this control alone, move others. For most of human history, there was a number that seemed impossible: 4 minutes. That's how long it would take to run a mile at a pace that medical experts said might literally kill you. They thought the human heart might explode, the lungs might collapse, the body simply wasn't built for it, and then Roger Bannister did it anyway. All the man did was control his own legs and his own mind. He broke through a wall that existed primarily in human belief. And look what happened to reality around him. Within a year, multiple other runners broke the 4-minute barrier. Now, high school students do it. The wall didn't fall because of schemes or manipulation or games of power played in athletic committees. It fell because one person demonstrated mastery over themselves, and reality reorganized itself around that demonstration. Here's what I think the 48 Laws of Power gets wrong in its premise. Yes, the world contains courtrooms. Yes, people scheme. Yes, manipulation exists. All of this is true. But the most consequential courtroom isn't the one filled with other people. It's the one inside our own heads. We have a judge in there who second guesses every decision. We have a prosecutor building cases for why we will fail. We have a defense attorney who makes excuses. We have a jury of past selves, past failures, past embarrassments, all weighing in on whether we deserve to act boldly. And we have a jailer, that inner Maud, the part of us that keeps us locked up in patterns that don't serve us, in comfort zones that have become cells, in stories about ourselves that stopped being true years ago. We must master that courtroom first. Influence flows naturally from demonstrated competence, that people follow those who seem to have conquered something within themselves. The person with the most leverage is not the loudest schemer in the room, but the one whose internal machinery wastes the least energy fighting itself. The one whose actions flow directly from intention without leaking through doubt, sabotage, or contradiction. The book claims that any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good, maybe. Or maybe the man who tries to be good all the time hasn't yet made peace with his inner jailer. Maybe he's suppressing rather than mastering. Maybe the constant effort to appear good is itself a kind of prison. The alternative isn't to become a schemer. The alternative is to become someone who doesn't need to scheme because they've handled the deeper struggle. We live in an age obsessed with external influence. Growth hacks, persuasion techniques, algorithms, and leverage and network effects. And none of it means anything if your hands are tied. You could master every law of power ever written. You could become the ultimate courtier, the perfect player, the most subtle manipulator in any room you enter, and you would still be limited by the game you haven't won, the negotiation you haven't finished, the jailer you haven't bribed. The world might be a courtroom, but before you can navigate that courtroom, you have to escape your cell. And before you can escape your cell, you have to convince Maud to carry your message. So bang on the door, shout, gain an audience. Figure out what your inner jailer wants, because all the machinery in the world, all the forklifts and power tools and heavy equipment of other people's influence, none of it will start if your hands are tied behind your back.